Hi all, this is Simona Rich and this is a video about Illuminati plan exposed by an insider. There was a meeting of pediatricians and students which took place on the 20th March 1969 at the Pittsburgh Pediatric Society, which was located on Ridge Avenue in Pittsburgh. One of the speakers was Dr. Richard Day, an eminent professor and physician and medical director of the organization Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was established in 1921. It's not important for this video, but basically it was funded both by the government and the Rockefeller Foundation. And at the meeting of the 20th of March 1969, Dr. Day asked the attendees not to take notes or record what he was about to tell them, something which was unusual for doctors at the time. Dr. Dunnigan got the impression that Dr. Day was talking as an insider rather than as a person who was presenting theory or speaking in terms of retrospect. Dr. Day's knowledge was concrete as he talked about the future and the strategies of people and organizations that had a defined plan for the world and were in a position to make sure that plan was executed. In introducing that there were those who had a plan for the world, Dr. Day also informed his audience that there was a time scale and that much of what they wanted would be achieved through plans that were already set in motion. Dr. Dunnigan recalls Dr. Day saying, "We plan to enter the 21st century with a running start. Everything is in place and nobody can stop us now." And that he felt relatively free to talk about this to those he considered friends. Dr. Day referred to the plans of those in power as being much bigger than communism. When talking about the people who had the power to devise and implement such plans, Dr. Day stated that they were not primarily in public office, those people, but were people of prominence who would be known to the public through their occupations or private positions. This ties in with what we know about the globalist elite today, primarily consisting of families involved in operating large-scale financial institutions, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and others, European royalty, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, Queen Elizabeth II, and others, and other extremely wealthy individuals that make up the 300 or so members. So I will now go to the text of what that insider doctor was telling what will happen. So basically this meeting of doctors took place in 1969. It was recorded in 1991, and everything actually that they told that would happen has happened except for the end game. And so I'm going to read out what was told in that meeting. Firstly, it was one of the first things that it was told was that they know how to cure all types of cancer, but cancer is used as means of population control. So they basically keep promising you that they will find cancer cure, but they don't. And that's to be expected because cancer is used as a way to control population. So if you really believe that those big charities supported by the government, taking taxpayers' money, taking donations, actually will invent cancer cure, then you are mistaken. They also told that medicine will be much more tightly controlled, which it wasn't in the past, but now of course it is. So this came true. It was told that private doctors will be the thing of the past, that they will have to work for some institution. And I guess I should read out this chapter. The next topic is medicine. There would be profound changes in the practice of medicine overall. Medicine would be much more tightly controlled. The observation was made Congress is not going to go along with national health insurance. That in 1969 he said is now abundantly evident, but it's not necessary. We have other ways to control healthcare. This would come about more gradually, but all healthcare delivery would come under tight control. Medical care would be closely connected to work. That's what's happening today, although that wasn't the case in 1969. If you don't work or can't work, you won't have access to medical care. The days of hospitals giving away free care would gradually wind down to where it was virtually non-existent. Costs would be forced up so that people won't be able to afford to go without insurance. That's what we are seeing today. India is still doing well though. People pay, you pay for it, you are entitled to it. It was only subsequently that I began to realize the extent to which you would not be paying for it. Your medical care would be paid for by others, and therefore you would gratefully accept on bended knee what was offered to you as privilege. Your role being responsible for your own care would be diminished. So basically, this website doesn't have everything that was told in that recording, and I will leave a link to that 4-hour recording, and I encourage you to listen to it to the full, all of it, and then re-listen if you can. Basically, it was told that you will have to have insurance in order for you to afford health care, and you would be grateful for that. Otherwise, you would never be able to afford health care on your own. That's why people love India and these places. Nepal is not great for healthcare, but India is. That's why foreign people still love it, because they feel that freedom which is gone in the West. Access to hospitals would be tightly controlled. Identification would be needed to get into the building. The security in and it was written in 1969. The security in and around hospitals would be established and gradually increased so that nobody without identification could get in or move around inside the building. Theft of hospital equipment, things like typewriters and microscopes and so forth, would be quote-unquote allowed and exaggerated. Reports of it would be exaggerated so that this would be excuse needed to establish the need for strict security until people got used to it. And anybody moving about in a hospital would be required to wear an identification badge with photograph and telling why he was there, employee or lab technician or visitor or whatever. This is to be brought in gradually, getting everybody used to the idea of identifying themselves until it was just accepted. This need for ID to move about would start in small ways, hospitals and businesses, but gradually expand to include everybody in all places. It was observed that hospitals can be used to confine people for the treatment of criminals. This did not mean necessarily medical treatment. He was describing the use of hospitals both for treating the sick and for confinement of criminals for reasons other than medical well-being of the criminal. The definition of criminal was not given. This makes me so appreciate what India was in the past, but unfortunately under Modi's government things are changing and he's fooling people into thinking that it's all for the sake of progress and their benefit, but of course it's not. And now people also in India need to be identified. Before it wasn't the case, but now because of the Modi's changes in the government, people will be required to have IDs, and it's also used against Muslims because that identification is a little bit based on religion. So some Muslims may even be denied the right to live in India, although they lived there for ages. So ID is coming to India. India will not be the same because of this psychopath running the country. Lawyers would be advertising their services. That's happening. It wasn't in the past. The solo health practitioner would become a thing of the past. And employees that remain, those of the medical establishment, will serve the employer and not the patient. And this is what's happening today. Doctors care about money. They are not working for patients. They actually are in the business of keeping people sick. Therefore, it's so important to keep yourself healthy, to avoid medical establishment like the plague. There will be new difficult to diagnose and untreatable diseases. But no more comment was made on this topic. And after that, AIDS came, and then all kinds of viruses. One of the statements was having to do with change. People will have to get used to the idea of change, so used to change that they will be expecting change. And now we are living in those times. Nothing will be permanent. This often came out in the context of a society of where people seem to have no roots or moorings, but would be passively willing to accept change simply because it was all they had ever known. This was sort of in contrast to generations of people up until this time, where certain things you expected to be and remain in place as a reference points for your life. So change was to be brought about, change was to be anticipated and accepted and expected. No questions asked. Another comment was made from time to time during the presentation was, people are too trusting, people don't ask right questions. Sometimes being too trusted was equated with being too dumb. The whole mass of people now, like sheep, sit in homes thinking that the government knows the best. They don't question. They're sheep, and the people that have invented the situation consider these people just dumb. But sometimes when he would say people don't ask the right questions, it was almost with a sense of regret, as if he were uneasy with what he was part of and wished that people would challenge it and maybe not be so trusting. The real and the stated goals. So important again for people to understand what we are hearing in the news is what is the cover for what actually they want to do, like this virus. Do they really want to save lives? No, this virus was invented so that the new world order is progressing, so that people are kept in their places, so to speak. It's not about saving lives, and people don't understand. They just see the save lives slogan everywhere now present, and they believe the government wants to save lives, whilst there are the stated goals and then the real ones. Problem, reaction, solution. Everything has two purposes, that doctor said. One is the ostensible purpose, which will make it acceptable to people. And second is the real purpose, which would further the goals of establishing the new system and having it. We all know how the game works. They create the problem, then they offer solution to this problem that they created. Population control. He was very active with population control groups. The population control movement and population control was really the entry point into specifics following the introduction. He said, the population is growing too fast. Numbers of people living at any time on the planet must be limited, or we will run out of space to live. Permission to have babies. People won't be allowed to have babies just because they want to or because they are careless. Most families would be limited to 2. Some people would be allowed only 1. And we see that also now people limit the amount of babies they have because they just can't afford more. And the outstanding person or persons might be selected that are allowed to have 3 babies. But most people would have only 2 babies, would be allowed to have only 2. That's because the zero population growth rate is 2.1 children per completed family. So something like every 10th family might be allowed the privilege of the 3rd baby. Redirecting the purpose of sex without reproduction and reproduction without sex. So that doctor said that there will be separation and people will be separation of these 2 functions, and people will be encouraged to have sex in any way they want. Homosexuality will be encouraged. People will be attempted to get to sexually mature much faster through sexual education in schools, and also condoms will be sold freely everywhere, and this in 1969 would be unbelievable claim to make. And abortion will be encouraged, and it's all due to population control. Families will diminish in importance. Families would be limited in size. We already alluded to not being allowed to have more than 2 children. Divorce would be made easier and more prevalent. Most people who marry will marry more than once. More people will not marry. Unmarried people would stay in hotels and even live together. Before, it wasn't allowed for unmarried people to stay in hotels together. We are talking about 1969 in India. It was very recently not allowed, and now things are changing. That would be very common. Nobody would even ask questions about people living together without marriage. It would be widely accepted as no different from married people being together. More women will work outside the home. More men will be transferred to other cities, and in their jobs, more men would